me tell you what the depressing part was. Up until that time, we always kept saying, my son will have a fantastic life. Like we would do everything to make sure my son has a fantastic life. Now, in this paperwork, I am writing in plain English with my own hands that my son is going to die. But at the end of the day, if I have to do that to find a treatment for my son, I'll do it.
On Raising Rare, we are bringing you the story of a young father whose son has an ultra-rare disorder known as Sedegatian-type spondyal metaphyseal dysplasia, or SSMD. My name is Kevin Freyert. Each episode, we will find out what is going on in the life of Sanath and his son, Raghav. We will talk about Raghav's growth and development, ongoing and upcoming research, and the challenges and adventures that raising a child with a nearly unknown condition brings. Come join us to hear the story unfold. This week on Raising Rare, we're going to be discussing an experimental medicine that Raghav started taking not too long ago. We're not going to focus too much on the experimental medicine, but rather, what were the feelings that were going through everybody as this was taking place? What was the anticipation? What anxiety did they have? What was the excitement about this first dose? And then what happened after that? To give you a better picture of this, we've also spoken to Sanath's dad, Ramesh, and he makes a few comments throughout the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. This week on Raising Rare, we are going to get a long-awaited update on the compassionate use IND for a treatment for Raghav. An IND, or investigational new drug application, is a request to the FDA to authorize giving it an experimental treatment to humans. Sanath, maybe we should remind our listeners about the compassionate use IND, what it's about, and how you put it together.
So a compassionate use IND is a paperwork that we submit to the FDA asking them to approve the use of an experimental medication. The idea is if a medication is already approved and available in CVS, I could go buy one and give it to Raghav as long as his pediatrician is happy. But for the medication that we are hoping to try, it is not approved yet, and it is currently in the process of approvals. And so we had spoken to the company late last year, around October, November timeframe, to get their buy-in and acceptance to give it to Raghav. And so they were happy to do that. The next step is to ask the FDA to essentially give us the approval. And that required coordinating between the hospital, a physician at the hospital, the company, and the FDA. To get that approval, we had to write a paperwork that I ended up writing it myself. The doctor reviewed that. It went through several layers of our approvals and feedback loops within the hospital. And finally, we submitted the application right when COVID hit. So FDA was super swamped with all of the work that they were doing in response to COVID. And so in about 3 months, they got back to us. And after more logistics set up, we finally got Raghav started on this experimental medication about 10 days ago. And so that's an exciting time that we eventually are able to get a treatment. We don't know how effective it's going to be, but something to get Raghav started on.
So tell me, what happened during that 3-month period when you had submitted to the FDA? Were they at least in contact with you, letting them know it's in queue or it's been delayed because of COVID? Did they communicate with you at all?
So the FDA doesn't communicate directly with us. So the IND is filed by the physician. So they take responsibility of giving the drug to Raghav, and they are the authorized person that is expected to file the IND. So the FDA had been in contact with my physician. They had questions around the protocol. They had questions around the consent form. And so it had to go through several rounds of revision, even after submissions to the FDA. So we are fortunate that the FDA was continuing to respond to us and not just let this sit in a vacuum. The other fortunate aspect is with an IND, according to the regulations, FDA is supposed to respond within 30 days of filing. And if they don't, then the physician has all the authority to start the medication on the patient. The understanding is that the condition is severe enough that patients cannot wait, and so FDA would prioritize these requests. And fortunately, even in the middle of COVID, they did prioritize. But I think it would have been faster if it was not for COVID.
Yeah, I think it slowed everything down. But I also note that they did come back to you and they were asking questions, which is the way that 30-day clock doesn't just expire without them looking at things. They really do try to engage with whoever's filed the IND. So it was from October until 10 days ago, so mid-July.
Yeah, it's roughly 9-10 months. Yeah, it's been a long process.
That's a pretty good clip for where you started with, hey, I need to write something. There's this idea, get the permissions. I mean, you went through a lot of steps to do that. So when did you actually get the news that the FDA had said, okay?
Was it early July?
Yeah, it was probably early July or late June or early July. We don't remember quite specifically. But our physician emailed us saying the FDA had approved it, and then they had to go through some more rounds of approval within the hospital. And apparently the hospital had to sign some paperwork with the company to get the drug dispensed to their pharmacy. So we thought the FDA's approval was going to be the final step in the process. But turns out after that, there were several rounds of paperwork and in different departments in the hospital that had to be engaged, again, in the middle of COVID to move this forward. So it was not as straightforward as we thought after the FDA approval.
And the thing that comes to my mind is back in December when Sanath wrote the IND paperwork for the first time. I remember us sitting in our physician's office right across the table from him and saying, we want this to be a New Year gift for Raghav. So we thought it was all going to be quick. The IND is done. It's Christmas. We're going to file in a couple of weeks. And in the first month of the year, in January, we would have the medicine. That was our expectation. We didn't know there's so many rounds of, approvals that needed and departments that needed to approve it. It was a long journey.
Yeah. So what was your response or your emotions when you got the notice from the FDA before you knew about the extra steps?
We were super happy. I think Sanath read the email first, phone. He came to us and with his usual, calmness, he wasn't excited or jumping. He was like, we got the FDA, approval. And it's me who was jumping all around saying, oh my God, we finally got it. And then there was Sanath's dad and mom who were very happy as well. So we were hugging each other, clapping, saying this was a good day. And it was a very, very happy moment.
I was very much kind of excited because the question is that with the long await has come the success of getting the tab of medicine, and I was expecting that I know that this is not going to have a miraculous change with the kid, but then we are in the right direction. I was feeling that we are in the right direction.
And Sanath, being himself, always takes everything in the same way. It's like, we got the approval. Let's just talk about the next steps. So he's happy, but we were the one who were jumping all around the house.
Always the project manager.
Always, yeah.
As a project manager, you know that the project never is complete. There's always the next step to do and the next step to do.
Were you two together when you found out, or you said he called you on the phone, or?
We were together. We were sitting in the patio, if I remember right. It was a nice, summer day. So Raghav and I were sitting in the patio, and then Sanath walked in from the living room and called us out from the patio saying, hey, we got the approval.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, it's something you work so hard for. And as you said, Sanath, it's a step, but there's another step after that, but it's one of those things that you can say, great. So congratulations. This is a big milestone in any drug's life. Filing that IND and getting the go ahead to move forward is like a moment that many people, across all drugs are looking for.
Yeah, we were very fortunate that this drug has a target that is GPX4. for most drugs that are repurposed, the target of the drug is not really the gene. We typically hope that the drug works, but the signs wouldn't typically match. And in this case, it's even more exciting because the target of the drug is actually GPX4, the gene specifically. So we really hope the drug works on Raghav more than it worked on other conditions.
So how long was it before you actually received this drug?
That was a long journey, because I think it's a challenge. Once we got the FDA approval, we thought, yeah, the drug could be dispensed the very next week. So I emailed the company and I said, hey, by the way, we've gotten the FDA approval. We are all ready to get the drug. Here's my shipping address. Here's my home address. Why don't you ship it to us? And the company was like, no, hang on. The hospital needs to sign paperwork A, B, C, D, E, F. Then the pharmacy needs to receive our drug X days before this. And then you need to complete a baseline visit with the hospital, with the doctor, and a second baseline visit. And then during the visits, you sign a consent form and then receive the drug. And by the way, once you receive the drug, here's how you should administer it. And we were really anxious at that point, and we really wanted to push the hospital and the doctor to make this happen faster. But we also knew that, we have everything lined up to get to the drug. It's just a matter of just like moving the paperwork along. We were kind of surprised at how fast the hospital moved, just given how slow things were before filing. So it took about a month, at least a month, or if not more, a month and a half, before we actually got the drug in our hand.
You mentioned you were anxious. What was the mood of everybody in the house during that waiting time?
I think anxious is the word that describes it. Everyone in the home, we were very excited, but at the same time, super anxious. And I personally was worried that, for some reason, the company will run out of, their drug inventory or whatever, and they would come back and say, hey, you know what, we don't have the drug. It's going to take 6 more months. So we were really worried things could even slip at that moment. So I think overall, we were excited, but kind of super worried that, because we've seen so many times that things slip right before that moment. So we were unsure if we'll even get the drug.
That was the anxiousness that we had. Ramya and I had. Our parents had different anxiousness.
Actually, I strongly believe that what is good will definitely happen at that time, the right time. Okay, it was really painful to wait for the medicine to come, but I also believe that when it was the right time, it will definitely happen, and whatever happens is for good actually. So the medicine possibly, yeah, we know that the earliest time age the child is given the medicine, he can come up better, he can catch up better, for example. Okay, so later part is difficult. Okay, but then the medicine has to work. That's what is more important, more than the time. So today, even it has come little late, but then hopefully it will work far better and faster.
Our parents were anxious, and they were really hopeful that after we start the drug, Raghav will be able to sort of stand the next day.
Yeah, that was my mom. She kept saying, oh, everything's going to be fine. He's going to just run around and it's all going to happen in a month. And I was this person going around and saying, don't keep your hopes high. Let's hope for the worst and let the best thing happen, right? So all I was hoping for is that he doesn't have side effects from the drug. One of the known side effects was that it could cause diarrhea. So I was just hoping that, once we start the drug, that his GI system first accepts the drug, and then we can hope for some benefits out of it.
How is the drug administered?
It's a capsule that we pierce and squeeze the contents into a little bit of formula and then administer it through a G-tube. The capsule itself is huge. I don't think I can even swallow the capsule myself. So when the company eventually gets an approval and has to go to the market, they have to find a more user-friendly capsule.
Here's one of those places where patient insight, patient feedback is important. And it actually is a huge decision. How big a capsule do you make? And they are still in the research stages, so I'm sure they'll come up with something a little more amenable to swallowing by the time they get it to market. But so you pierce it and put it into formula.
Yeah, so we administer. Raghav takes all of his food through a G tube that's connected directly to his stomach. So we administer that through the G tube. The drug itself is like oil, so it separates out. But it doesn't actually mix with the formula, but it's given with the formula just to help his stomach be a little bit at ease.
Once you were getting ready to give it to him, you mentioned you were worried about side effects. Were there any other worries that maybe you guys didn't talk about, or the things that were a little deeper than oh yeah, I'm anxious and I'm worried about diarrhea? Was there anything else you were worried about?
And not specifically health concerns, but there were some unsaid, worries about who's going to administer the drug to him for the first time. And then once the drug is here, do we keep it in front of God, pray, and then do it? Or do we just believe science and go directly give it to him? So there were all these unsaid questions that were going on in our living room. So our kitchen is mid-sized. I wouldn't say it's super huge or whatever. So the first time we were about to give him the drug, all four of us were right there inside the kitchen trying to see what happens. How are we mixing it? Who's going to give it to him? So there was this, unsaid thing going on within us. And I think Sanath was the one who administered the drug to Raghav for the first time. So it was a fun experience.
I think at the end of the day, it's a very emotional moment for us to be able to help him and give him a chance. This is a drug that we'd all waited for so long. We've had so much hopes pinned on the drug. And so there were a lot of unsaid emotions that went through the house on who's going to do what and what's going to happen to him. And we kept looking at his face after we gave him the drug to see if he's uncomfortable for the next 30 minutes or 1 hour. And then we kept checking his diaper to see if he pooped too hard. He didn't know that he was given a drug. Nothing changed in him. He's just being his own self, which is the best outcome.
What was going through your head when you first put it into his formula? That's a big moment.
We didn't know what it was going to do to Raghav. Thoughts that were running into our heads were, what if something drastically bad happens to him? It's an experimental drug at the first place, right? What if something drastically bad happens? What if one of the more severe side effects show up? And typically, drugs are super strong in their nature. So we didn't. Besides the diarrhea, what if something else happens to him? And so those were all the concerns that were going in my head when I essentially prepared the drug to give it to him. In a couple of hours, it was obvious that this drug didn't cause him any discomfort or difficulty. And that was a big relief to us. And now we continue to give him for the 10 days, for the last 10 days. It's been normal so far.
Have you seen any promising results yet?
The aftermath of after we started the drug, every time we see him now do something that was different from before, we start to wonder, is it the drug that's helping him? For example, he's just been trying to turn his head a tiny bit. We were wondering if that was a drug doing it, or if he's trying to move his hands a little bit more. Is this really the drug that's helping, or is it just simply because he's moving his hand naturally? And so every single activity that he does now, we try to correlate whether this is the drug that's helping him or not. And that is a lot of unsaid thoughts going into our heads in the background every day with every activity, because we really want to see something coming out of the drug.
So you said he's been on it for 10 days now. Can you tell us a bit about how you're monitoring those things? What's the data collection, the burden that you have on this? Have you created some of your own so that you can watch this and try to get, a feeling for, is there a trend here? Or is something changing versus just saying, hey, he moved his hand and not having a basis for whether that was a drug or not? What are you doing to collect data?
Yeah, so our physician did 2 baseline visits prior to starting the drug, and the baseline visits included echocardiogram, a lot of blood work, and just physical exams. So every we have a protocol that we will continue doing more monitoring on him at the physician's office, including blood work and echocardiogram every few weeks. So starting with first month, second month, and then it spaces out from there to 4, 6, and 9, I think. But we'll continue monitoring him clinically. At home, we have a Google form that we fill out every day, and we've been doing that the last 90 days. And the Google form essentially tells us the activities that he's been doing, how much time he's spending on tummy time, how much vomiting he has per day, if he has constipation or not, if he's responding to sounds, if he's turning his head, and so on. And those have been very reliable indicators of changes that we have done over time. For example, the number of vomits he had per day went down from an average of 7 to an average of 1 or 2, simply because we moved a medication from the night to the afternoon, and that changed everything with him. And we don't really know why, and no doctors can explain why, but we have data to show that that's exactly what changed and caused all of this to happen.
We are very excited to announce that Kevin and Sanath will be hosting the Rare Together Watch Together event on Friday, September 18th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Rare Together Watch Together is brought to you as part of Global Gene's live Rare Patient Advocacy Unsummit in partnership with the Disorder Channel. Rare Together Watch Together will be presenting films about people in the rare disease community through a free Facebook live stream. You can find out more details about the films and how to watch at globalgenes.org/summit-agenda. We hope to see you there. How do you all get involved?
So everybody in our household is trained to think scientifically, and we are trained to isolate all variables and look at one variable at a time and change it over. So recently, we are also trying to stop that one vomiting from happening as well. And so we have a scientific method of doing one change at a time.
Right. There was this big discussion yesterday between Sanath and his dad on how we can bring down that, one vomit that he has every day. They came up with a bunch of ideas and said, this is what we're going to try. And those conversations are really hard, I'd say, because you don't want to blame anyone for it. You want to be respectful of everyone's ideas. But as Sanath said, everyone in our household is now trained to think that way. And they think about all the different variables, not touching anything and changing just one thing so we can see if it works or not on Raghav.
And this is something that we had learned since he was a little baby. We used to change a lot of variables at the same time to tune his quality of life. Primarily that was around his vomiting and his GI symptoms. And we quickly realized we were hoping that the doctors would sort of guide us to figuring out what variables to control for and what outcomes to look for. And that didn't happen. And so when we started tweaking variables and storing data by recording it into notebook, we realized we were never able to get to a satisfactory outcome for us. And so after several months is when we really felt like we have to be scientific about it, change one variable at a time. And now we are pros at it. So we do collect a lot of data on him. We have a very objective way of measuring when things change. We don't take anything for face value. If Raghav is suddenly reacting to a new sound, for example, we assume that is random and that is not correlated until we see very strong, consistent correlations with that sound. And so when Raghav, or if Raghav has an improvement that he can show us, and he can consistently do that for several days on row without any sort of fluctuation, then that's when we'll know the drug has really helped. And so far, everything that Raghav has been doing new started prior to the drug, and we have data to show that it's prior to the drug. So we don't have any improvements recorded yet.
When you do these scientific experiments and you're showing something here, you're demonstrating something, which at the same time can be aggravating. So medicine works the same way. When you go to the doctor, they're going to try to change one thing and or take stepwise, approaches to their diagnosis or their treatments. and it takes time. So how long do you guys kind of give in between those changes and variables?
At least 4 to 5 days. I think even if something's not working, we still stick onto it for 4 to 5 days before we make another change.
Yeah, so we play out the timelines for all the changes we want to make, and pick the one that we think would have the most success with him, and start that. Stick around for 4 to 5 days before we introduce another variable or reverse it.
So it's a little less than a week, but roughly, and that makes sense to me, especially if you're talking about something like vomiting or something where you can see a discomfort or something. You can see a change fairly quickly. What about the side effects that you were worried about?
Funny thing is, we were hoping for a little bit of side effect on him because he's been constipated for the last several weeks, and he's on some constipation medications, and so we were hoping that the side effect of diarrhea would hopefully relieve his constipation and sort of like neutralize into a normal GI bowel movement. That didn't happen yet, so we were a little disappointed, and we were all actually quite hoping for that. So when we started Raghav on the drug, the next morning we were all like, "Oh, he's still not pooping," because we were all partially hoping that this drug side effect would help us GI system. That's the major side effect that is expected out of the drug. There are several side effects listed in the consent form that we had to sign from what the company had noticed in prior trials or from animal experiments. But those were all fairly minor side effects. One of the challenging things with this drug is it's high doses of fat. So as I said before, it's just oil, fat, and they've made a slight tweak to a normal fat to make it protective. So high doses of fat obviously can have impact to his heart, which is why we are constantly monitoring his heart through EKG. So we're hoping that it's okay for him to continue on this drug. And the other kids that have taken this drug haven't, at least the parents that we've spoken to, haven't talked about any sort of heart problems at all. So that's the only more severe side effect of this drug that we're worried about.
You can watch through the monitoring that you're doing through echoes and EKGs and things. So at least it's something there. And you haven't seen anything. So it may be that, you're not going to see it. But what do you hope to see on the plus side here? What if this drug is doing what you're hoping it's doing? What's it going to be in 6 months from now, a year? What do you think those visits would be like?
That's a very, very difficult question. I think all of us have secret hopes, right? We want all the way from, no vomit, 0 vomits per day. That's the, least that we can hope for. And then comes head control, all the way up to Raghav running around and talking like other kids do. So I think we all have hopes of different levels for this. And grandparents are the ones who are on the, higher side, hoping for a miracle, for this drug to be a miracle.
I believe that the growth protein will be safeguarded. Because of that, the child will really catch up the growth, both cognitively as well as physically, and he will be able to carry out the things by himself.
But I think, I sincerely hope that there is some improvement to his quality of life, something very noticeable.
Very importantly for me, if you ask me, the number one and the first and the only, if you say somebody tells me that only one thing, if you ask, I will say that he has to eat by mouth, swallow better without aspiration. This happens because all other external physical things can be improved by way of physical training. Okay, the aspiration thing we cannot do anything. So if the medicine is going to help him to have his food intake better without aspiration, that will be, I would say, that done the purpose actually.
I know you asked us a question about our vacation plans or our taking Raghav to Disneyland. Maybe this medicine will get us there.
A real practical outcome. The most important thing is life better.
That's the one that we cannot really predict. we could look for what other kids have performed on this drug and how it helped them. Given that this is a completely different condition, there is no data on how Raghav is going to perform. So we have to really wait and see. And the challenge is, how long do we wait? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be 1 year before we say, oh yeah, the drug isn't doing anything as much as we hope for, so let's stop giving it to him.
And we have already started thinking about the next drug that we should get for Raghav, the next experimental medicine. Right? Started doing our research there in case if this fails, or if we want to add one more to take him a step further. So we've started looking beyond this medicine now, hoping it will do what it has to.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's not possible for just one medication to completely solve all the problems, and that's true with any medication. Even if you take something that is as common as a aspirin, right? It's not going to solve all the problems. It's going to relieve some of the symptoms, and that's the same case with this medication too. So we are hoping that we could stack up one on top of the other that attack the problem from multiple different angles, and hopefully we will get to a tipping point where we've covered enough of the problems with the solution that Raghav will start to see these exponential improvements in quality of life. And we're already starting to see some of those improvements right now with the medication that he's already been on since last September. And these are a cocktail of supplements that he's on. And we've recently noticed that his skeletal abnormalities have improved quite significantly. So earlier this week, we had a chat with Raghav's orthopedics doctor, and he said that the abnormalities that he had when he was born are not there anymore. And so that's actually a very surprising and astounding result, to quote his word. And so he doesn't really know how that's possible, because they always thought the skeletal abnormalities, especially when it's congenital, always go down. It's always a downhill and never get better. So that's already a win for us. And we're verifying that that's not a normal course of the disease, and it's due to the drug cocktail that he's on. But we're hopeful that if we kind of keep adding on more drugs that have different mechanisms of action and tune the cocktail to a point where all of them together could help, I think the sum could be greater than the sum of the parts.
That's news about his orthopedic issues, resolving, that the bones are starting to grow more normally. That is fantastic news, and you called it a win, but you've actually scored a huge win here. So it's less than a year since you knew what this genetic variant was, this GPX4 missense mutation, and to have started him on a treatment that may slow the effects of that variant within less than a year is astounding. You deserve huge kudos and congratulations. But I'd like you to speak to other rare parents and grandparents who are fighting for their kids. Give them a snapshot of right now. What's your outlook? What's your mindset with the ongoing research efforts?
I'll give my outlook, and then Ramya will give her outlook, which is very different. So my outlook is, I don't trust that any of this will work, and we'll continue finding more treatments for him, and we'll also continue having other kids with this condition get to treatments. I think that's the next challenge we have to deal with is if the skeletal improvements that we had seen on Raghav are real, then we should immediately get the other kids on the cocktail that Raghav is on, because it's going to help the other kids too. So our challenge, my outlook at this point is, it's great that we've gotten this far. It's great that things are starting to look better, but Raghav is still not sitting. Raghav is still not capable of walking by himself or even holding his head up. And until all of those happen, until we are able to send him to school and kick back and relax and watch Netflix at home, I think we still have a job to do.
Very good point. It is a journey, and you've gone around one of the turns now, and there's still more path to go. How about you, Ramya?
I think this is one of those things that I agree with Sanath, which very hardly happens. But I think for this question, my answer is very similar to what Sanath said. We started off this journey saying there is not going to be a miracle, and I think I still stand by it. Having our hopes too high on just one medication or just one researcher to give us the answer is it's not practical. We learned that early on. So I think we will still continue to find other medications, be it, repurpose an existing medication or go in for gene therapy or whatever it takes to, give Raghav a good quality of life. I'm not sure if we can get him back to the way if he were born without a problem at the first place, but I'm sure we can give him a quality of life that will make him happy, achieve goals, and do whatever he wishes to. So I think that's our goal, and in whatever form it takes. It doesn't have to be the perfect solution, but we are hopeful we'll get somewhere.
Raising Rare is produced by Salem Oaks, empowering patients and caregivers to shape the future of medicine. CureGPX4.org is dedicated to finding a treatment and cure for SSMD. You can donate to CureGPX4 on the Raising Rare podcast page or at curegpx4.org. You can continue to follow Raghav's story next time on Raising Rare.